Beneath a moon veiled in frost, a single flame danced defiantly in the snow, whispering promises of warmth to the forsaken. Alara had always sensed the pack's rejection simmering like a storm on the horizon, inevitable and merciless, ever since her birth as an Omega in the mist-shrouded valleys of the Silverfang Mountains. Her gifts were subtle, woven into the fabric of her being, a healer's touch that could knit torn flesh and soothe fevered brows, yet it failed utterly against the jagged rifts of loyalty and hierarchy that defined wolf society. The night of her banishment arrived with the savagery of winter's first gale, the Alpha's voice booming through the assembled pack like a thunderclap, his amber eyes blazing with the unyielding fire of ancient traditions. "She undermines our strength with her cursed visions," he had growled, his words laced with disdain as if her pathfinder's sight, glimpses of futures that unraveled his carefully guarded power, were a poison seeping into the pack's veins. The ritual that followed was brutal. A ceremonial slash across her palm, her blood dripping onto the sacred earth to sever her ties, the metallic tang filling her nostrils as the pack turned away, their howls fading into indifferent silence. Driven into the frozen wilderness, Alara trudged through the relentless blizzard, her fur-lined cloak sodden and heavy, each footfall sinking into drifts that seemed to pull her deeper into oblivion. The wind clawed at her exposed skin, carrying the distant, mournful weavos of her former kin, a chorus that twisted her heart with longing and resentment. Numbness spread from her fingertips upward, a cold that mirrored the isolation gnawing at her soul, but she pressed on, guided by an inner resilience forged in quiet endurance. At her throat hung the silver locket, cool against her heated skin despite the chill, a heirloom from her mother, its surface engraved with the waxing and waning phases of the moon, a symbol of cycles unbroken even in exile. It was more than jewelry. It was a talisman, pulsing faintly as if alive with the Deuce's own breath, reminding her that some bonds defied even the Alpha's decree. As the storm-tossed peaks gave way to the dim lights of Eldridge Hollow, a forsaken human village clinging to the mountain's edge like a stubborn weed, Alara allowed herself a fragile hope. The settlement was a patchwork of weathered cabins and sagging barns, its inhabitants, loggers, trappers, and wanderers, hardened by the land's indifference, their lives a grind of axe swings and hearth-tending far removed from the moonlit rituals of the packs. She slipped into the village under the cover of dusk, her wolfish grace masked by a human guise, and found shelter in the Rusty Lantern Tavern, a dimly lit haven where the air was thick with the scent of peat smoke, spilled ale, and roasting venison. Taking work as a waitress was a necessity born of survival. Her hands, steady and calloused from years of tending wounds in secret, moved deftly among the patrons, pouring drafts and clearing plates with a quiet efficiency that drew few questions. The hearth's flames crackled invitingly, casting elongated shadows that played across the scarred wooden beams like spectral dancers, and for the first time in days, the locket's weight felt less like a chain and more like an anchor. Yet peace was illusory. As the evening wore on, the tavern filled with the low rumble of conversations, tales of vanishing livestock, and eerie howls in the woods. Alara felt the undercurrent of her otherness, a subtle alienation that no amount of human pretense could fully erase. The snow outside piled higher, muffling the world, and the moon's pale light filtered through frost-laced windows, illuminating the locket's intricate etchings. She paused in her duties, fingers tracing its edges, lost in the philosophy of her exile. What was strength, if not the will to endure when all bonds shattered? The door groaned open then, admitting a blast of icy wind and a lone figure whose presence shifted the room's atmosphere like a gathering thunderhead, stirring the embers of her guarded spirit into uneasy flame. The stranger entered like a specter forged in the blizzard's heart, his broad frame shrouded in a mantle ragged from thorns and unrelenting tempests, carrying the faint, metallic whisper of distant blood on the gale. King Thorn of the Ironclaw realm had abandoned his throne not in defeat, but under the crushing burden of a guilt that festered deeper than the gravest battlefield wound, a shadow that followed him through every moonlit vigil. Once a formidable alpha, whose commanding roars rallied legions across frozen tundras and blood-soaked borders, he had been the architect of victories that expanded his realm under crimson skies. But that legacy crumbled on the night of the border skirmish, a desperate gambit for peace that claimed his mate's life. Her final gurgling breath echoing in his ears as she fell, her blood staining the snow like spilled rubies, a sacrifice he had ordered in the name of duty. The Deuce's retribution was swift and subtle, a curse of barrenness, denying him heirs and leaving his line teetering on extinction, his every dream haunted by her accusing gaze. Now, stripped of his crown's pomp, he wandered the fringes in disguise, his alpha essence subdued to a mere ember, seeking not glory, but atonement in the solitude of exile. His ethical core, once a beacon of just rule, now eroded by melancholic self-doubt. The storm had herded him inexorably to Eldridge Hollow, where the flickering lights of human habitations promised a temporary reprieve from the wild's judgment. He pushed through the tavern door, shaking snow from his boots, the warmth enveloping him like an unwelcome embrace that thawed both body and buried regrets. Settling into the shadowed corner booth, Thorn ordered a simple mug of mulled wine, his silver-streaked hair falling across eyes that mirrored the tempest outside, storm-gray and turbulent, holding depths of unspoken sorrow. The patrons gave him wide berth, sensing the aura of restrained power that clung to him like frost on iron, whispers circulating of a lone wanderer with the bearing of forgotten nobility. Alara felt the disturbance before her eyes confirmed it, an instinctive gravitational pull as if the moon itself tugged at her core, drawing her toward this enigmatic alpha. She approached his table with a tray balanced, her steps measured despite the flutter of apprehension in her chest, the locket warming subtly against her skin like a warning. Their gazes collided as she set down the steaming mug, a raw electric spark that ignited in the hearth's amber glow, unbidden and intense, stirring instincts she had long suppressed. Fear coiled tight in her belly. Alphas of his caliber viewed Omegas as disposable vessels for pack needs, not individuals worthy of regard. Yet beneath the wariness bloomed a fragile curiosity, petal soft and perilous, like venturing too close to an open flame in the dead of winter. "The passes are treacherous this eve, stranger," she said softly, her voice threading through the din like a silken thread, steady even as her pulse raced. He inclined his head, his calloused fingers brushing hers in taking the mug, a fleeting contact that sent a jolt racing up her arm, hot as forged steel, lingering like the aftertaste of forbidden wine. As the night deepened and the tavern's crowd thinned, the wind's howls grew more insistent, rattling the latticed windows and sending drafts snaking across the floor. Thorn's solitude drew idle speculation from the remaining souls, murmurs of rogue wolves prowling the tree lines, omens of unrest rippling from the pack's distant territories. From behind the bar, Ilara observed him covertly, the locket now a persistent thrum against her collarbone, as if it attuned to the hidden fractures in his essence. The weight of command veiled in quiet despair, the scent of old blood and unhealed scars faint on the air. When a burly logger, flushed with drink, shouldered past her roughly, sending a tray of empties crashing to the planks in a spray of foam, Thorn was there in an instant, his strong hand steadying her elbow with a gentleness that belied his warrior's build, yet carried the subtle command of one born to lead. "Mind your step in this gale," he murmured, his timbre a deep, resonant rumble akin to thunder rolling over distant peaks. The touch ignited a war within her, denial of the instinctive bond clashing with the intrigue of his guarded vulnerability, the connection weaving itself into the night's intricate, chill-embroidered tapestry, leaving her breathless and unresolved. In the tavern's hearthlit sanctuary, where shadows wove alliances as tight as fate's unyielding threads, two wanderers forged a tentative pact against the encroaching veil of night. The peril arrived not with the fanfare of bared fangs and thunderous charges, but with the insidious creep of disguised threats. Thorn's relentless pursuers, a cadre of rogue wolves from splintered packs, exiles who had morphed into mercenaries hungry for the bounty on a fallen king's head. As the blizzard outside intensified, Whipping snow against the walls like vengeful spirits, these interlopers slunk into Eldridge Hollow under the guise of storm-weary travelers, their eyes gleaming with predatory intent amid the tavern's deceptive warmth. Ilara, methodically wiping down the scarred oak bar with a rag damp from spilled spirits, caught the first flicker of unease in Thorn's posture, the subtle stiffening of his shoulders, the way his gaze sharpened on the door as it creaked open to admit 3 figures cloaked in sodden hides, their scents laced with the musky undernote of wild fur and malice that no human nose could detect. The air grew heavy, saturated with the acrid bite of hearth smoke mingling with the intruder's barely concealed aggression, tension coiling like a spring in the dim confines. Instinct propelled Ilara and Thorn into unison. He rose fluidly from his seat, positioning his bulk as an unyielding barrier between her and the newcomers, while she edged toward the fire, her fingers closing around the iron poker still glowing from the coals, its heat seeping into her palm like a promise of defiance. The leader of the rogues, a scarred brute with a sneer curling his lips, scanned the room, his eyes locking on Thorn with recognition that twisted into a feral grin. "Fancy finding a ghost in such a den," he rasped, the words a prelude to violence as his companions flanked him, hands twitching toward concealed blades. The brawl ignited in a chaotic frenzy, tables overturned with splintering crashes, chairs skidding across the floorboards as fists met flesh and claws extended in partial shifts, the air alive with guttural snarls and the sharp crack of impacting bone. Ilara swung the poker with precision born of desperation, its fiery tip searing a gash across one attacker's arm, the stench of singed hair and flesh rising amid the melee, her healer's instincts warping into a primal urge to protect this unexpected ally. Thorn moved like a tempest contained, his strikes economical and lethal, dispatching the second rogue with a crushing blow to the throat, then grappling the leader in a lock that drew beads of blood from strained jaws, the metallic tang blending with the tavern's spilled ale into a visceral symphony. The fight's rhythm pulsed with raw energy, the hearth's flames leaping higher as if feeding on the chaos, casting erratic shadows that danced like warring phantoms across the walls. When the last assailant slumped, gasping against the bar, Thorn and Ilara worked in breathless tandem to barricade the door with a heavy bench, the wind's furious protests muffled but unyielding. Adrenaline ebbed, leaving them panting in the wreckage, the room a tableau of shattered mugs and smeared crimson streaks on the planks. Thorn knelt before her, tearing a strip from his already ragged mantle to bind a shallow cut on her forearm, his touch feather-light yet charged with an undercurrent of alpha command, igniting a warmth that permeated the lingering chill of fear. "You wield that iron like one who's stared down worse than winter," he observed, his voice laced with a rare note of admiration, eyes searching hers for the story behind her ferocity. Ilara held his stare, the mirror of his own shadowed guilt reflecting back in her features, the raw ache of rejection echoing his profound loss. "And you shield like duty is both your armor and your cage," she replied, the words carrying the weight of shared understanding. As the distant howls of retreating foes dissolved into the storm's roar, an empathy took root, transforming peril into the fragile beginnings of a profound bond. The fire settled to a gentle crackle, its light caressing the locket's silver surface, a silent emblem of dormant strengths stirring to life in the quiet aftermath. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The moon ascended to its zenith over the jagged peaks, drenching the concealed cavern in ethereal silver, where long-buried secrets unfurled like frost-kissed petals under the Deuce's watchful eye. Dawn's pale light had barely pierced the storm's remnants when Ilara and Thorn abandoned the tavern's fragile safety, slipping into the mountain's labyrinthine folds under the locket's subtle guidance, a faint, insistent pull that steered them toward a network of caverns etched into the granite heart of the Silver Fangs. The air here was crystalline and biting, infused with the resinous perfume of ancient pines clinging to sheer cliffs and the damp, mineral tang of subterranean streams trickling through hidden fissures. Snow crunched softly underfoot as they navigated narrow ledges, the wind's sigh weaving through crevices like the Deuce's murmured prophecies, while distant weavos, perhaps echoes of pursuing packs, lent urgency to their flight. The cavern they claimed as refuge was a natural cathedral, its vaulted ceiling studded with glittering quartz that caught the moonlight filtering through a high cleft, transforming the space into a realm of shimmering illusions. Huddled beside a modest fire kindled from scavenged tinder, its flames snapping and curling like captive spirits yearning for freedom, Alara felt the insistent stirrings of her latent gift, a pathfinder's vision, suppressed since the pack's scornful dismissal, now awakening in the Alpha's proximity like a seed quickened by spring's first thaw. Thorn sat across from her, his presence a solid, comforting weight in the confined space, his melancholic gaze tracing the flickering patterns on the walls before settling on the locket's delicate chain at her throat. The warmth of the blaze chased the perpetual chill from their bones, but it could not dispel the undercurrent of vulnerability that hung between them, thick as the cavern's mist. "What shadows pursue you beyond the storm?" he inquired, his voice a low, velvety timbre that resonated off the stone, inviting confession without demand. Alara's fingers trembled as she unclasped the locket, the metal cool and familiar in her palm, revealing the nestled shard of moonstone that began to pulse with an inner luminescence, soft as a heartbeat. In that radiant glow, the visions cascaded upon her without mercy, fragmented tableau of Thorn's storied past, the young king astride a war steed under blood-drenched moons, orchestrating triumphs that carved his realm from chaos, the harrowing skirmish where his mate perished, her lithe form crumpling amid whirling snow, her life's essence pooling dark and accusing on the white expanse, and deeper still, a prophecy etched in lunar script, foretelling redemption through an unforeseen union, a bridge between broken souls. The torrent crested with a searing clarity, Thorn, his regal features etched with desperate hope, cradling a diminutive, disabled wolf pup in his arms, its frail body limp and fur clumped with neglect, tenderly borne by a human waitress whose compassionate eyes and steady hands were unmistakably her own. The revelation struck like a physical blow, Alara gasping as the cavern whirled in a vortex of light and shadow, her knees buckling under the vision's intensity. Thorn lunged forward, his arms encircling her with unyielding support, concern deepening the furrows on his brow as he steadied her against his chest, the steady thrum of his heart a counterpoint to her ragged breaths. "Your eyes, they pierce the veil of what is, unveiling what must be," he murmured, awe threading through his words, as if beholding a miracle long foretold. Trembling, Alara nodded, the moonstone's light ebbing to a gentle flicker within the locket. The gift had laid bare the profound truth. She was no mere outcast adrift in exile, but the pivotal key to shattering his enduring curse. A hidden child, his sole surviving heir, frail and concealed, awaiting reclamation in the shadows of destiny. The fire's warm embrace enveloped them anew, the cavern's silence profound, as the mantle of fate descended like a fresh layer of unmarred snow, binding their paths in irrevocable luminescence. Confrontation simmered in the crystalline corridors of buried memories, where the ghosts of bygone sins rose to exact their inexorable toll. Whispers of Thorn's improbable survival rippled outward like cracks in glacial ice, reaching the ears of his once devoted beta, now a treacherous shadow corrupted by the honeyed promises of a rival alpha coveting the Ironclaw throne. The betrayer mobilized swiftly, dispatching scouts and rallying dissidents to scour the borderlands, their pursuit a relentless tide driven by ambition's foul scent. Alara's visions sharpened in the cavern's confines, tormented fragments of the disabled pup's plaintive whimpers reverberating through her mind like echoes in an empty hall, compelling her toward resolution. The locket seared against her skin, a fervent beacon amid the mounting tempest, its lunar etchings seeming to writhe with urgency. Twilight draped the mountains in bruised purples when the assault materialized, the rival's vanguard materializing from the fog-enshrouded tree lines, a phalanx of wolves clad in armor of hammered steel and frost-rimed leather, their synchronized howls a dirge of retribution that chilled the blood. Thorn positioned himself at the cavern's yawning mouth, his physique rippling with the coiled fury of a predator long-leashed, while Alara drew upon her burgeoning gift, summoning veils of illusory mist that cloaked their defenses and disoriented the onrushing foe. The clash unfolded in savage poetry, claws scoring unyielding stone with sparks like falling stars, blood arcing through the air to splatter across crystalline outcrops in intricate vein-like patterns, the moon hanging overhead as an impartial arbiter, its light gilding the melee in silver and shadow. Amid the fray, Thorn locked eyes with his beta, the atmosphere crackling with the residue of their fractured brotherhood, once forged in battles side by side, now poisoned by disloyalty. "You bartered our sacred honor for the illusion of power," Thorn snarled, evading a vicious swipe that whistled through the air, his movements a blend of regal precision and raw desperation. The beta's retort was a venomous laugh, his form blurring in a partial shift as he pressed the attack, fangs bared in a grimace of triumph. Alara, weaving through the chaos with the poker now sheathed at her side, placed her hand on Thorn's arm, a grounding touch that channeled a surge of crystalline insight, a vision blooming of mercy's blade outshining the allure of indiscriminate slaughter. The beta lunged with killing intent, but Thorn countered with a deft twist, disarming him and pinning him against the rock face, the alpha's breath hot and ragged. "Depart this place. Proclaim to all that redemption lingers for those who seize it with open hands." The words hung heavy as the attackers scattered into the gathering dusk, routed by the tide's turn. In the battle's wake, the crossroads sharpened into focus. The delicate promise of love arrayed against the solitary freedom of endless wandering. Forgiveness, a double-edged sword that severed old wounds to birth new beginnings. The locket swayed gently between them, an emblem of trajectories that diverged yet converged in destiny's intricate design. Amid the smoldering remnants of strife, a profound moral juncture shimmered beneath the moon's timeless vigil, illuminating paths of grace and consequence. Pressing onward into the mountain's unforgiving embrace, Alara and Thorn traversed treacherous ravines and veiled passes, the spectral wails of the disabled pup amplifying in Alara's visions. A vulnerable whelp, offspring of Thorn's cursed bloodline, secreted away by steadfast loyalists within a secluded lunar temple, its cries a siren's call to healing. The locket served as their lodestar, its glow intensifying with each arduous mile, leading them to the temple's frost-encrusted spires that pierced the sky like frozen sentinels, adorned with bas-reliefs depicting omegas as luminous healers mending the grievous hurts of fallen kings. Pursuers nipped at their heels, shadows of the rival's lingering malice, but in these trials, their nascent bond deepened immeasurably. Thorn's entrenched guilt yielding to the balm of Alara's unyielding quietude, her own scars of rejection resonating with his profound bereavement like harmonies in a tragic ballad. At the temple's sanctum core, encircled by altars of polished marble veined with quartz, they discovered the child, a minuscule wolf pup, its coat patchy and unkempt, limbs malformed from the cruel twist of its birth, emitting feeble whimpers that tugged at the soul. Thorn's inhalation caught sharply, crystalline tears tracing frozen paths down his cheeks as he scooped the tiny form into his embrace, its fragile warmth a divine revelation against the chill of his armored chest, the weight of paternal longing crashing over him like an avalanche. Alara extended her hand to join his, the locket parting with a soft click to unleash a cascade of lunar radiance, which enveloped the pup in a healing aura, knitting sinew and fortifying bone in a symphony of ethereal light and subtle, restorative energy. The air hummed with the deuce's approval, the temple's braziers flaring brighter as if in celebration. But serenity shattered with the rival Alpha's thunderous arrival, his horde bursting through the arched portals like a dark tide, snarling warriors with eyes alight for conquest, the Alpha himself a towering figure of scarred menace, demanding the heir's annihilation to cement his usurpation. Thorn rose to meet him, the pup nestled securely against him, his stance a bastion of protective resolve. Empires reared on rivers of blood inevitably fracture and fall, he intoned, his voice steady as ancient oak, opting for the nobility of compassion over the barbarism of domination. The skirmish erupted in controlled ferocity, temple flames surging unnaturally to engulf encroaching foes, blood and melting snow intermingling in a primal, visceral ballet across the sacred floors, the clash of claw on claw resounding like war drums under the vaulted dome. Alara's Pathfinder essence unveiled the rival's concealed shame, a festering doubt that sowed discord among his ranks, turning blade against blade as warriors recoiled from their leader's hypocrisy. Triumph emerged, not from Carnage's embrace, but from the rival's abject capitulation, his form vanishing into the nocturnal shroud with his routed followers. As tranquility descended, Thorn turned to Alara, the inexorable choice crystallizing, their union as the anvil upon which redemption would be hammered, mercy's flame tempering the steel of their shared fate. The locket's fervor subsided to a serene gleam, its mission woven into this transformative act of clemency. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. The pack's imperious summons materialized like a blood-sealed covenant beneath the full moon's unblinking scrutiny, its pale light slicing through the night like a divine decree, inexorably drawing Thorn back to the throne he had relinquished in the shadowed recesses of remorse and self-imposed exile. The arduous journey to the Ironclaw Citadel, a monolithic bastion of glacial ice and unyielding granite, enthroned upon the summit's razor-sharp edges where the wind eternally keened like a chorus of lost souls, demanded a profound reckoning with the full spectrum of Thorn's haunted legacy, each step a pilgrimage through terrains that mirrored the fractures within his spirit. Alara walked steadfastly at his side, her presence a quiet bulwark against the encroaching doubts, while the pup, now exhibiting nascent vigor in Thorn's protective hold, wriggled with tentative energy, its tiny paws kneading against his chest fur, a vibrant affirmation of the miracle they had collectively wrought. The air grew thinner and sharper with altitude, laced with the crisp bite of pine resin and the faint metallic undercurrent of distant avalanches, as the locket at Alara's throat oscillated rhythmically with their strides, ensnaring stray beams of moonlight that traced silvery rivulets across the perpetual snowfields, as if the Dusa herself extended a luminous hand to guide their ascent. Whispers of their approach had preceded them like harbingers, threading through the pack's sprawling ranks, scouts relaying tales to the heart of the realm, of the prodigal king's re-emergence, inexplicably entwined with an enigmatic Omega whose aura hummed with otherworldly resonance and the miraculous air cradled in his arms. A fragile yet undeniable symbol poised to upheave the precarious equilibrium of power that had teetered in his absence. As they crested the final ridge, the citadel loomed into view, its towering spires of translucent ice refracting the moonlight into prismatic shards that danced across the snow like scattered stars. The structure a testament to ancient craftsmanship, where walls of frozen stone whispered secrets of battles long etched in frost. Guards at the outer gates, hulking betas with eyes narrowed in wary recognition, parted without challenge, their deference laced with unease, and the trio was ushered through winding corridors lit by sputtering torches that cast wavering shadows, the air heavy with the scents of oiled leather, smoldering herbs, and the underlying musk of 1,000 wolves gathered in anticipation. Within the grand hall, a vast chamber vaulted like a cavernous maw, the assembled elders awaited, venerable figures cloaked in ceremonial furs adorned with runes of silver thread, their faces etched with the deep lines of epochs past, eyes gleaming with a mixture of reverence, suspicion, and barely veiled ambition. The hall thrummed with subdued tension, the low murmur of voices rising and falling like the tide, while braziers along the walls exhaled curls of incense that carried notes of sage and bloodroot, intended to purify the space for judgments of fate. Thorn stepped forward into the circle of light at the hall's center, the pup's soft, exploratory whines punctuating the silence as he declared his proclamation. his voice resonating with the unbowed determination forged in trials beyond their ken. I shoulder the burden of my losses, yet refuse to be shackled by their ghosts. Guilt has been my companion in exile, but it shall not dictate the realm's future. The words hung in the air, met with a ripple of murmurs, the elders shifting on their thrones carved from ancient oak and bone, their gazes flicking between Thorn's resolute form and the pup, whose malformed limbs now showed signs of strengthening, a quiet miracle that stirred both awe and fear. And Alara lingered in poised silence at his flank, her healer's instincts attuned to the undercurrents of the assembly, her pathfinder's acuity piercing the facade of unity to expose filaments of subterfuge spun by residual traitors. Shadowy figures among the ranks whose scents carried the sour tang of deceit, their ambitions festering like unseen infections beneath the surface of loyalty. The discord ignited when a grizzled elder, his pelt streaked with the white of advanced years and his voice gravelly from decades of commands, advanced with predatory intent toward the child, his clawed hand outstretched as if to seize the air and dash it against the stone in ritual rejection. This whelp is an aberration, a curse's spawn unfit for the Ironclaw line. Its weakness mocks our blood's purity, he bellowed, his words igniting a spark of outrage among the more conservative elders, their growls building like thunder in the chamber. Alara interposed herself without hesitation, stepping into the breach with a grace that belied the storm within, the locket at her throat igniting in a sudden blaze of revelation, its moonstone core flaring to life and projecting ethereal visions that cascaded upon the hall like a luminous tapestry unfurling. The air shimmered as images bloomed in vivid splendor, divergent futures etched in light and shadow, realms sundered by ceaseless strife and crimson deluge, pacts fracturing into warring factions under the weight of unyielding tradition, rivers of blood staining the eternal snows. Contrasted against visions of unity forged anew in the crucible of compassionate governance, where the pup grew into a wise alpha, his disabilities transmuted into empathetic strength, alliances blooming under moons of peace, the deuce's favor evident in bountiful hunts and unbreakable bonds. The visions held the assembly in thrall, breaths held as the philosophical weight settled. What was power, if not the courage to embrace the vulnerable as the heart of renewal? The discord swelled into a full tempest, fists balled in defiance, voices ascending in a cacophony akin to gale-force winds howling through narrow canyons, accusations flying like arrows in a skirmish. But Thorn's intrinsic ethical compass endured, refined by Alara's subtle guidance into an instrument of tempered justice, his presence a calming force amid the chaos. He extended the olive branch of exile to the malcontents, his tone firm, yet laced with the melancholy wisdom of one who had tasted loss's bitter depths, eschewing the fatal allure of execution that tradition demanded. Depart with your lives intact, and let this be the dawn of a pack that chooses mercy over massacre. One by one, the dissenters bowed their heads, slinking from the hall with tails low, their departure a concession to the shifting tide. As the chamber succumbed to a reverent hush, broken only by the pup's contented sigh, their bond coalesced into an unspoken covenant, a serene vow blossoming amid the residual undercurrents of strife. The locket's quiet radiance now a sentinel over their evolving alliance, pulsing like the collective heartbeat of a realm on the cusp of redemption. In the temple's hallowed sanctum, where shafts of lunar luminescence pierced the vaulted ice dome like divine lances from the heavens, destinies intertwined in a resonant overture of deliberation, conflict, and irrevocable choice, the air thick with the scent of ancient incense and the electric promise of transformation. Unyielding in his avarice and fueled by the sting of prior defeats, the rival Alpha, Lord Varric of the Shadowclaw Fringes, a brute whose scars told tales of ruthless ascents, orchestrated a climactic onslaught against the Citadel, marshalling his legions under the sanguine veil of a blood moon that painted the night sky in ominous crimson hues, transforming the once serene fortress into a maelstrom of orchestrated pandemonium. The assault began with insidious subtlety, scouts slipping through the outer patrols like wraiths in the fog, sabotaging watchtowers with poisoned barbs and igniting diversionary blazes in the lower wards. Their howls muffled at first, but building to a crescendo that shattered the crystalline air. Turmoil reigned supreme as the walls trembled under the battering ram's thunderous impacts. The dissonant symphony of steel clanging against claw, reverberating through labyrinthine corridors hewn from permafrost. Sparks erupting like fleeting constellations amid the fray. Blood mingling with melting snow to form slick, treacherous pools that reflected the moon's baleful glow. Warriors clashed in visceral fury, fangs sinking into flesh with wet crunches, claws rending armor in showers of metallic shards. The temple's outer defenses holding tenuously as Alara and loyalists ferried the pup to the inner sanctums, her heart pounding in rhythm with the chaos, the locket a warm talisman against her chest. Thorn spearheaded the defense from the battlements, a whirlwind of calculated ferocity at the vanguard, his form a blur of shadowed power as he leaped from parapet to fray, dispatching assailants with strikes honed by years of regal command, each movement a testament to the ethical warrior he had reclaimed, sparing where possible, but unyielding against the tide. The blood moon hung low, its light gilding the melee in a surreal patina of red and silver, the wind carrying the coppery tang of spilled life and the acrid smoke of burning pitch. Alara, ensconced in the temple's core with the pup cradled close, its small body trembling yet resilient, channeled her Pathfinder's essence through the locket, evolving it into a nexus of safeguarding prescience. Visions manifesting as conjured phantasmal legions, spectral wolves materializing from the mist to sow confusion among Varric's ranks. Illusory howls and phantom charges turning the tide with dread precision. Warriors recoiling in terror as their own shadows seemed to betray them. Blades halting mid-swing in bewildered hesitation. Yet the pivotal ordeal transpired not in the open carnage, but in the recesses of the spirit. Within the throne room's opulent expanse, a chamber of polished obsidian and draped tapestries depicting ancient lunar rites now scarred by the siege's echoes. Thorn, isolated by Varric's cunning feint that drew away his guards with a false breach, found himself cornered amid the room's flickering torchlight, the rival Alpha emerging from the gloom like a demon unchained, a colossus of malice with eyes burning like forge embers, his pelt matted with the blood of fallen foes. Varric's taunts were barbs honed on Thorn's deepest vulnerabilities, his gravelly voice dripping with contempt. Your guilt is your crown's undoing, Ironclaw. Did your mate's ghost whisper of this weakness when you bartered her life? Face me in duel to annihilation, and perhaps the Diusa will grant you the absolution your cowardice denies. The air crackled with the scent of ozone and impending violence, Varric circling with predatory grace, his massive frame casting elongated shadows that clawed at the walls like living entities. Alara materialized at the threshold then, her arrival a tempest of ragged breath and unyielding resolve. Having navigated the besieged halls with visions guiding her steps, the pup secured in a hidden alcove behind her. She crossed the room in strides that echoed with purpose, her essence an unshakable mooring in the roiling storm of Thorn's turmoil, interposing herself between the alphas as claws extended and muscles coiled for the fatal leap. True strength resides not in the fatal strike that sates vengeance's hunger, but in the mercy that withholds the blade, forging peace from the forge of restraint, she breathed, her words an echo of the Diusa's timeless sagacity, infused with the hard-won philosophy that had bound their souls through exile and revelation. What is redemption, if not the choice to heal where hatred demands destruction? Thorn faltered in his stance, the locket's effulgence flaring to cast a revealing light upon Varric's concealed trepidation, a distorted reflection of his own inner tempests, visions unveiling the rival's festering doubts, a lineage built on betrayal, a heart hollowed by the very power he craved, warriors' loyalties fraying under his tyrannical rule. The moment stretched eternal, the blood moon's pulse sinking with their breaths until Thorn surged forward, not in rage, but in clarity, With a fluid parry honed by ethical resolve, he divested Varric of his jagged blade, the metal clattering across the stone as he secured the foe in unyielding bonds woven from the room's ceremonial chains, the rival's snarls dissolving into impotent fury. "Your ambition ends not in my blood, but in the judgment of a pack reborn," Thorn intoned, his voice steady as the mountains themselves. Word of the capture rippled outward like a shockwave, the invaders' morale crumbling as spectral illusions and real reinforcements converged, driving Varric's legions back into the night-shrouded wilds, their retreat a howling cacophony fading into the storm. The resolution cascaded through the fortress, affection supplanting the solitude of liberty, absolution reshaping the epic in forgiveness's forge, as Alara and Thorn converged at the epicenter amid the settling dust, the pup nestling contentedly between them with a soft, affirming nuzzle, the essence of rebirth descending like a sacred anointing, profound and transformative, the locket's glow dimming to a serene ember in the aftermath's quiet embrace. Beneath the waning moon's compassionate vigil, its silvered light softening the jagged horizons like a mother's tender gaze, sacrifice flourished into an everlasting union, mending fate's deepest fissures with threads of luminous grace and unbreakable resolve. With the rival Varric vanquished, his chains a symbol of tyranny's fall, and the Ironclaw pack coalescing under Thorn's revitalized sovereignty, the air in the citadel hummed with a newfound harmony, elders and warriors alike murmuring prayers of gratitude as the blood moon yielded to the gentle curve of its waning sister. The culminating rite transpired within the lunar temple's consecrated embrace, a sanctum deep within the mountain's heart where walls of veined marble rose in graceful arches, etched with millennia-old carvings of omegas and alphas entwined in rituals of renewal. The space perfumed with the subtle bloom of nightshade and moonbloom incense that curled lazily toward the domed ceiling, pierced by a crystalline oculus that channeled the celestial light. Alara's gift attained its zenith in this sacred hour, her Pathfinder's visions now a torrent of clarity as she fused the locket's arcane potency to the pup's burgeoning spirit, kneeling before the central altar, a slab of polished selenite glowing faintly. She pressed the open locket to the whelp's chest, channeling waves of restorative energy that coursed through its veins like liquid moonlight, bestowing upon him the vigor requisite for his destined alpha mantle. The pup's form responded miraculously, limbs straightening with audible cracks of mending bone, fur thickening to a lustrous silver gray, its eyes opening wide with an intelligence that sparkled like stars, a joyful yip escaping its muzzle as strength flooded its tiny frame, the deuce's favor manifesting in this tangible rebirth. Nevertheless, true Renascimento exacted its poignant levy, demanding more than mere survival, a surrender of the old self to birth the new. Thorn proffered the throne's isolating mantle in a gesture steeped in symbolism, abdicating its solitary pomp before the assembled pack elders who had gathered in solemn witness, his voice carrying through the temple's resonant acoustics. No king rules alone. Power's true seat lies in shared burdens and mutual grace. He stepped down from the dais, not in diminishment, but elevation, pledging to govern as equals with Alara, their intertwined fates the authentic seat of authority, redefining hierarchy through partnership's lens. Love as proof of redemption, not its glittering prize. The assembly watched in hushed reverence, the philosophy of their union rippling outward. What is destiny, if not the freedom to choose compassion over conquest, weaving fate's threads into a tapestry of healing? The ritual's crescendo unfolded amid vortexes of swirling snowflakes that danced inward through the oculus like summoned spirits, and the hypnotic flicker of ceremonial torches arranged in lunar spirals, their flames leaping in hues of blue and gold as if alive with the Deuce's breath. Thorn and Alara stood at the altar's heart, their hands clasped over the locket, drops of their mingled blood drawn in a ceremonial prick from their palms, anointing the relic in a ritual fusion of fire and frost, crimson droplets sizzling faintly on the moonstone before absorbing into its depths, their essences harmonizing in a dance of elemental equilibrium that sent tremors through the stone floor, the air vibrating with a low, harmonic hum. Vows exchanged in the tongue of ancients flowed from their lips, Thorn's deep timbre pledging protection, tempered by vulnerability. Ilara's melodic voice vowing insight guided by empathy, the words binding them under the moon's gaze, the pup circling their feet with exuberant bounds, its invigorated howls rising in a jubilant chorus that resonated through the vaulted chambers, emblematic of the sovereign wound's ultimate healing, a symphony of renewal that echoed into the distant peaks. No vestige of warfare lingered in this sanctum, supplanted by an enduring peace that settled over the pack like a warm pelt. Despair's shadows banished utterly by faith's radiant triumph, the ethical choice of mercy crowning their path with quiet authority. As auroral light crested the horizons, heralding dawn's arrival with tendrils of rose and gold that gilded the majestic peaks and filtered through the temple's ice-veined windows, Thorn enfolded Ilara within his arms, drawing her close amid the fading incense haze, his whisper a tender oath against her ear, warm breath stirring her hair. You transmuted my guilt into boundless grace, forging light from my darkest voids, turning exile's frost to the hearth of home. She leaned into him, the locket now cool and quiescent between them, its purpose fulfilled as a bridge between shattered pasts, their love, germinated in the scorched remnants of rejection and loss, standing as irrefutable testament to redemption's trial, a transcendent alchemy blending destiny's inexorability with the sacred autonomy of choice. The pup nuzzled against their legs, a living emblem of renascent hope, as the first rays warmed the snow-swept lands below, the realm awakening to an era where every wound could find its healer, eternal under the moon's benevolent watch. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.